This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au. With more homes for sale than anywhere else, realestate.com.au is Australia's #1 address in property.
Welcome back. There are 2,548 homes scheduled to be auctioned this week. That's up 43% when compared to the same week last year. New South Wales will hold 906 auctions with 763 in Sydney. Victoria will hold about 1,200 auctions this week with virtually all of them in Melbourne. Queensland will hold 264 auctions with about half of them in Brisbane. South Australia will hold 127 auctions with almost all of them in Adelaide. Western Australia, Tasmania and the Northern Territory will hold 21 auctions between them, and the ACT will hold 72 auctions. Taking a look at the most viewed properties going to auction this weekend, and in New South Wales, it's 30 Bowness Court, Kellyville. This four-bedder sits on 450 square metres. The top property in Victoria is 11 Linton Lane, Highton. This four-bedder is in the heart of Geelong, has a real 1970s vibe. The top property in Queensland is 546 Darcy Road, Carina. This is another 1970s themed house with timber detailing inside. The top property in South Australia is 17A Fife Avenue, Torrens Park. This 1940s two-level home is inspired by the English Tudor era of architecture. And the top property in Western Australia is 16 Wanborough Way, Duncraig. This four-bedder, built in 1973, backs onto a large park. And the most viewed property on the REA Group website this week is an unusual one from Perth. This property sits on about 6,200 square metres, has a direct frontage onto the Swan River. The address is 93 North Road, Bassendean. The ad claims this property is one of Perth's most recognisable buildings. It's certainly unique. It's actually two buildings which both have strong Gothic church vibes with large stained glass windows, turrets, bell towers and lots of sandstone. The first was built in the 1910s. The second was built and designed by the late owner of the property, a man called Lloyd Leist, who, according to media reports, was a taxi driver. This is a one-of-a-kind, eccentric place that's quirky and unusual. There are no photos of the inside, which is a bit of a red flag. It obviously needs a lot of work. The agents are taking offers, but this one is quite unusual, so it could be a tough sell. For more on property, I caught up with Paul Ryan from REA Group a little earlier.
Yeah, I think what we normally see is the number of auctions tailing off after Easter, but we haven't really seen that this year. We've got 2,500 auctions scheduled this weekend. That's extremely strong, up 43% on the same weekend last year. We just continue to see this really strong numbers, both in listings and in auctions.
Yeah, clearance rates, they look around 60%. So that's pretty solid, isn't it?
Yeah, 60% is considered pretty solid. Not exceptional, not unexceptional. And that's consistent with the continued price growth that we've seen across all the major markets.
Are there any capital cities worth calling out that are doing a bit better than others?
We continue to see the smaller capitals outperform. Perth in particular is up almost 20% over the past 12 months, but Adelaide and Brisbane also are performing really strongly. It's really only kind of Hobart and Melbourne that have been a bit flat over the past year or so, and Sydney's about in the middle, around 7 to 8% over the past year.
Broadly, what sort of price growth are you expecting over the rest of this year?
So we've seen a bit faster price growth over the first half of this year than we expected, but we're expecting that to slow down a bit, partly because interest rate expectations have been pushed out and partly because affordability is really quite strained, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne.
You said about 2,500 properties up for auction this weekend. You said things normally cool down after Easter, but when are you expecting stock to slowly ease off as we get into the colder months?
Yeah, June and July tend to be slower in terms of market activity, and I think what we'll see is we'll continue to see a stronger kind of June than traditionally, but we will see a slowdown. That's pretty normal. That's the standard seasonal pattern of the market. The thing we've seen is we've just seen more transactions all throughout 2024 than we've seen over the past couple of years.
You mentioned rates kept on hold this week by the Reserve Bank. When do you think rates might start to fall? Are we talking 2024 or is it now 2025?
People are starting to talk about 2025. The major banks are still expecting a rate cut in November, but I could see that really being pushed out to early 2025 at the moment. Inflation is coming down more slowly than anticipated. That's the key thing the RBA is watching, and they were really keen to emphasise that they will be really vigilant to any upside surprises to inflation from here. So what we didn't see a month or two ago was any risks of a rate hike, and I think that's back on the table now. So what that means for rates is the most likely next move is probably still down, but later than we previously thought.
It's interesting because the Bank of England kept rates on hold overnight, and their governor's suggesting rates could start falling as early as June. But it's a totally different story for us and for the United States as well.
Yeah, like we saw Australia raise rates a little slower than other countries, and so it's probably a bit natural that we'll see them reduce rates a little bit after overseas economies. Really, every country, although there are common inflationary trends across the world, every country has its own situation, and in Australia we're seeing higher inflation than in other economies.
Budget next week. Treasurer says one of the main centrepieces, there's a few of them, but one of them is going to be on housing. What do you want to see, or what needs to be in there for the housing sector? Because we know there is obviously a big undersupply right now.
Yeah, I think housing is one of the big issues for Australians at the moment. And I think the government is pushing in the right direction in terms of unlocking supply. That's the ultimate thing we need to reduce housing costs. What they've kind of pointed to has been things like tradespeople, unlocking more trades. That's one of the key constraints to building more homes. The other thing I think we need to see is support for the most vulnerable Australians. Last year we saw Commonwealth rent assistance increase by 15%. I think more support's needed there. I mean, rental affordability is at its lowest level in at least 18 years. It's continuing to be tough, particularly for the lowest income Australians.
And we've had some state budgets out recently and a couple more to come. Do they need to start looking at stamp duty? I know New South Wales had a go at it and gave up, but
I think so. It's when we talk about structural reform, not just in housing, but in the economy overall, stamp duty reform is one of the big eggs that are yet to be cracked. It could unlock a huge amount of productivity across the economy, people moving to homes that better suit them. That unlocks housing supply that we already have. We don't need to build these new homes. So I think really this is something that the National Cabinet as a kind of joint group should start to consider. But yeah, really, I think state government should think about it.
Paul Ryan, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.